Hey guys, how's it going? Today we are going to be doing a bearded dragon care guide video. I've been getting a lot of interest in Max, my bearded dragon, specifically from my non-reptile friends who are thinking about getting reptiles, so I thought, hey, maybe I'll make a care guide on her since she's a good starter reptile and she draws a lot of interest. Also, I haven't posted a care guide for a while, specifically because I like to make sure I definitely know their care and I'm confident in their care before I go ahead and make a care guide. So I've done a lot with Max lately. I've been through some struggles since moving into this place with humidity and stuff, and that taught me a lot of lessons. So I think I'm pretty confident in her care guide now, and everything's going pretty swimmingly with her. So let's get to it, and we'll talk about bearded dragons. Before continuing on with this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button in the lower right hand corner, that little image, and then turn on that bell notification so you know when I post a new video. Thanks. First things first, I want to talk about Max's enclosure. This enclosure is about 6 feet by 3.5 feet. It is a very big Beardie enclosure, and I do know this is probably bigger than what most of you will probably get. The minimum, the bare minimum I would recommend is a 50-gallon tank. Even that is, a little pushing it. I think optimal is a 4 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet size enclosure. I think that would be like a nice medium. But I know a lot of you that's a little out of the question, especially if you're not really super getting into the reptile hobby. You might not want to build something like that. So 50-gallon breeder, or 50-gallon is the minimum. But something a little bit bigger would be nicer. They will use the space. They are a little bit lazy, but they will use what you give them. I also have a second layer up here. She kind of enjoys the climbing, so make sure you have some like climbing wood or something in there for some recreation. Other aesthetics in here is just a hammock. They love to lay on hammocks. It's quite cute. She also sleeps under there as a hide. I'm working on getting a custom hide for her. That's probably the only thing missing from her tank currently, but hides are very important. Then she has her salad down there. She has a water bowl in the back, although she never uses it. And she's got a little rock here for helping with sheds. So we'll talk about shedding later. And we'll talk about what this big tub is later too. Now, Substrate. I am not an anti-substrate type of guy for bearded dragons. I do have tile, and I did use Reptile carpet before this. Reptile carpet is a little annoying to me, so I didn't really want to use it. I am a big fan of the tile. It's easy to clean and stuff like that, especially someone who's renting. I don't have to worry about removing all the dirt when I finally move out of here. But if you want to use Substrate, if you keep them in optimal conditions and stuff like that, try to keep it away from their food and stuff, feed them in a separate tank. I don't think there's anything wrong with actually putting in some natural substrate, but just make sure you do your research if you do it that way. You want your basking spot to be around 100 to 105 degrees for an adult Beardie. A younger Beardie might want something a little hotter, probably 100 to 110. Here you can see probably the most intense spot is about 104, I believe. You want to make sure you measure this with an infrared gun, as this will accurately give you the temperature of the spot you are checking. Other temps you might want to check is the low end of the enclosure. This is basically the side opposite of your heat source. This should be probably in the mid 70s. Bearded dragons can tolerate into the high 60s pretty well, which should probably be your nighttime temps, the lowest. But your low end temp should probably be mid 70s to low 80s. In the morning time, this is my low end temp, 73 degrees, which is a little low, but it is in the morning time. During the high point of the day, it is in the high 70s, low 80s, which is optimal. You also want to mimic natural light in their enclosure by giving them UVB. I got Arcadia Desert D3 plus 14% T5 bulb, 32 inch. The size you want to get is what's roughly 2/3 the length of your enclosure. That's why I got the 3-foot one. And you want to make sure they cannot get within 15 inches of the light. Now, as for food, they mostly eat a diet of invertebrates. I feed them dubia roaches from my colony. I have a video on that. Check the card on the top right if you want to look into setting up your own colony. But they also can eat other things like crickets and mealworms, stuff like that. This is probably the best nutrition-wise for them. And they're not as smelly and annoying as crickets and stuff like that. So I definitely recommend dubia roaches. This is her main diet. They also are supposed to start switching to more greens as they get older. Usually around their first year is when they should start switching. Max has always been a problem with greens though, so if you really gut load your roaches fine, or whatever your feeder insect is fine, then it's okay if they really don't eat their greens too much, because they'll get that nutrition from their invertebrates, but hopefully you guys won't have that problem that I am having. When you are feeding your Beardie your bugs, make sure you are dusting them in calcium. I dust them every time I feed them with this Reptile calcium, without D3. If you have adequate UVB, you shouldn't need to give them D3 every day. So I dust them every time in this calcium, every time I feed them. And then once a week, I will also cover them in this multivitamin, which I believe also includes D3. If it doesn't or does, it's not a big deal. You might want to give them a little bit of D3 every week just to make sure they're getting, enough, they're producing enough. But if you have adequate UVB, it shouldn't be that much of a problem. So yeah, every time this, once a week, this. As for water, I have this little bowl here that's full of water. They don't really drink from still water like this, though, so she rarely goes in it. Only time she finds it there is when she runs into it by accident, and she's like, oh, that's water. They like dripping water. So what I recommend is to keep them hydrated, because if they're not hydrated, there's a lot of problems. Use a spray bottle and spray them on the nose. I'll show you in a minute. And it keeps them hydrated, they drink from it, and it's probably the best way to give them direct water and hydration. So this is how I give her water. I use the spray bottle, and I just give her little droplets on her nose. She really hasn't been thirsty lately. Usually they'll go right to town on it if they're thirsty. Just keep going though for a little bit if they don't respond right away. Sometimes it takes them a couple seconds. But this is probably the best way to give them hydration, like, directly. Like I said, they don't really respond to still water that well. I would try to attempt this at least twice a day, especially if they don't drink the first time. They don't need a ton of water because they are a desert species, but they need to stay hydrated or it will cause problems. And we can talk about those problems later on in the video. Now I have this tub in our enclosure to increase the humidity levels. It is full of warm water. This is a great way to get humidity up in an enclosure. I have a video mentioning this, so check the card in the top right. But I have this in here to raise her humidity. If you're measuring humidity, you probably want to aim for around 40%. A little higher is okay, especially at nighttime. But 40% during the day is a good number. This is to help with shedding and stuff, so it's very important. Now let's talk about shedding real quick. As you can see, Max right now is undergoing a shed. She's got some on her back here, some on her little feeties, and she's got one going on the end of her tail. Now the tail is usually the problem area along with some of the feet. This is where stuck shed happens a lot. Stuck shed is where they retain their shed and they don't shed it off like they're supposed to. And it's usually a cause of a lack of hydration and humidity in the enclosure. We just talked about humidity, so if you have good humidity levels and something for them to rub against, you shouldn't have any retained shed problems. But this is what it looks like when they're shedding, so if you see them go white, if they're not dying, that's just them shedding, that's what they do. Sometimes they don't shed all at once though, which is fine. I don't think many lizards shed all at once. I think it's just really some snakes do. So it'll be a little patchy like you see here, which is totally fine. And usually if you see it lighten up like it is, that means it's going to start shedding in a couple days or so. She's been like this for almost a week now, so it should be coming off rather soon. Like I said, you do want something in the enclosure they can rub against. I have this little kind of a rock here. I think it's a cement rock. That way she can rub up against it and try to remove some of her shed by hitting the rough edges. So I recommend having some type of bark or climbing wood in there that they can also rub against to help with their sheds. Now let's talk about handling and aggressiveness. So you can see right here, Max is sitting on me, rather relaxed. This is why they are a great starting reptile. They are kind of lazy. They are fast though, so just be aware. But they are kind of lazy, they are kind of relaxed. They will just chill with you and like hang out. They'll just sleep next to you. They're just like a great companion. They're not going to go darting off and leave you alone, and you're going to have to run around trying to make sure they don't end up somewhere you don't want them to end up. They will try to look for some tight spaces though if you give them some time. So that doesn't mean don't keep an eye on them, but they're just a great companion to sit with and chill with, and usually they won't give you a problem. That being said, They don't always enjoy handling. They are solitary creatures and sometimes do get stressed when you handle them. She flips out kind of sometimes when I pick her up. Sometimes she'll flail, so make sure you give them a good base when you pick them up so they feel safe and confident in your hands. If they really do not want to be touched, you might observe them turning black, especially around the beard. The beard also might be puffed up. One of the two reasons you would see bearded dragon turn black is them being stressed. Another reason being that maybe they're a little cold and they'll turn black to absorb more heat, since black absorbs light. But usually it's a sign of stress. Sometimes they'll open their mouth and kind of make aggressive motions at you if they're really pissed off. You'll see that more in wild beardies, though, nothing captive. She's never given me an issue. I've only seen her blow up kind of once. And blow up, I mean, have that puffy beard, and that was at the vet. But usually they're pretty chill and they'll tolerate a lot. Just be aware, though, if they're stressed, just give them some space, and then usually they'll get used to you eventually. Some issues you might want to be aware of. Number one, if you have a female beardie, they will still produce eggs even if you do not breed them. A lot of female lizards do this. So you will need to probably make a lay box, even if you're not breeding them. This is my lay box here. I also did a video on this. Check the card in the top right if you want to look into that. So it's really simple. It's not that hard. It's just organic soil and sand. And it's just for them to lay their eggs if they want to. Now, this does not mean that they will always lay eggs. Sometimes they'll choose not to, but there could also be some problems with retaining their eggs also. So you want to check a vet probably around springtime, because that's usually when they go ahead and start producing these eggs. Also, a beardie probably won't start producing them in general until they're around 1 year old. So when you first get them, it's not that big of a deal. But you might want to consider, going to a vet and checking on them. It takes a lot of energy out of them too, so you want to make sure they're eating very nutritious stuff and they're well energized and stuff like that. So a vet visit is not the worst thing to do in that case. And you might even need to spay them. I really haven't looked into that option, but sometimes it could be fatal, some issues with eggs, so you might want to consider that as well. I don't really know much about the pros and cons of spaying them, but that is something to consider. Another common issue I see with bearded dragons is too low of humidity or the lack of hydration in your beardie. Just because they're desert species doesn't mean that they don't need humidity or they don't need to drink water a lot. This could lead to a lot of potentially problematic issues. It could even be fatal. For example, if they don't have enough hydration, their urate could harden, preventing them from going to the bathroom. They keep that in their tummy, and that's just bad. That's fatal if you don't get to a vet. You want to make sure that they're hydrated. That way they can pass the urate. It doesn't harden. Humidity helps with this too. If they do go to the bathroom a lot when you put them in a warm bath, but not otherwise, you probably want to feel their urate and make sure it's not hard. You shouldn't have to give them a bath for them to go to the bathroom. You should just be able to have them in their environment like this and them just go to the bathroom. So if you're giving them baths a lot for them to go to the bathroom, then you might want to check your husbandry. Another big issue in bearded dragons is metabolic bone disease. This is the promotion of phosphorus and the lack of calcium or D3. This is why UVB is important, or natural light. It prevents this, and why calcium supplements are important and things like that. So make sure you do those things, or else you're going to get some bone deficiencies and your bearded dragon's going to look a little bit weird and they're going to be in a lot of pain. Other possible issues is mouth rot, a respiratory infection, and impaction. You can look up some of these. I'm not going to go into detail. Impaction is something you should probably worry about if you're doing some natural substrate, but with the correct husbandry, I don't think you should have a problem. All these are potentially fatal though, so make sure you understand them. One last mention I want to make is about housing multiple beardies in the same enclosure. You shouldn't probably do that. Female beardies can be housed together in an adequate space, but there could still be problems. Male beardies are going to fight. I feel like the only time you should house beardies together is if you're breeding, so I'm just going to put that note in there. Alright guys, that's it for our bearded dragon care guide. I went into a lot of information here, but this should be more than enough to get you started into this beginner reptile, a bearded dragon. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please subscribe, check that bell notification, make sure it's on. Thanks for watching.